see how the video does. It looks a little dark. Maybe it'll show up a little better on the video. But we left off and we were prorating everything. So give me some examples of things we've prorated. Taxes. HOAs. Interest. Who's the interest that we are prorating?
Buyers.
The buyer's interest on that
Prepaid
first
interest
month.
on the
Prepaid.
mortgage.
Yeah, the prepaid interest on that mortgage for the first month. So the same process is pretty much consistent along all those prorations. Figure out your daily rate, and then we just have to figure out the number of days. So the rules of thumb: who owns the day of closing typically in regards of taxes?
The seller in
The
North
seller.
Carolina.
Yeah, North Carolina, typically the seller owns. Now, what if the problem says that the buyer owns the day of closing? You're going to give it to the buyer. You're not going to charge the seller for that. What about the mortgage interest? Who gets charged for the day of closing on the mortgage interest? Buyer will get charged for that day. So remember, most of the time the seller pays the day of closing except with that mortgage interest, and then the buyer will pay that. Questions on prorations, any of that stuff? Y'all pretty good at that. Proration masters. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, question. When you're burning taxes, do you not round the numbers up? I think I was doing a problem this past weekend and I like rounded a number up and I got a completely different number at the end. So I didn't know if you don't round during the problem. I guess I'm just always used to rounding after the decimal. You know what I mean?
I usually, as a rule of thumb, will not round until we get to the end.
Yeah.
The only difference is with excise tax. If you are calculating excise tax, you always round up to the nearest dollar. It's never got changed.
Also, before you start, you round up to the first 500, right?
Yeah, so it's purchase price divided by 500, and then you just round up to the nearest dollar.
Okay.
So it would be, instead of 579.63, it'd be 580.
Because the book says it rounds up to the next 500.
It's not to the next 500.
So that's wrong?
So yes, however you're reading that is wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, it should be sales price divided by 500.
Because I remember looking at it, I thought,
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing
No,
it.
they don't round to the nearest 500. No, it's, I've seen it $382, I've seen $486, so it's never a 500 on the dot. Good call, good question. Other questions? If not, let's see what we can do today. So we are actually going to touch base on proration one more time, and we're going to prorate rent. We finished up prorating HOA dues. Remember, with HOA dues, you just have to watch when they're billed, whether it's quarterly, monthly, or annually. So just remember when you're getting your daily rate to prorate appropriately. And the last problem we did with the HOA was a quarterly billing. The new owner will pay the last 3 quarters of the year. We just had to figure out how to prorate that first quarter, right? So with rents are usually paid on a monthly basis. So we're going to look more of a daily rate. This is a real life scenario where you may be purchasing or selling a property with a tenant in it. It's an income producing property. Oh, you need calculators, good call. It's an income producing property, and you will, in fact, want to say how much rent is being collected and who gets what portion of it. Because if I'm buying a property that rents for $1,000 a month and I'm closing in the middle of the month, I want my $500 in rent. Anybody else? Good? Cool. So in this case, it is going to depend on if the rent has been paid. That's always something to consider. And likewise, be careful about the number of units. Now, what do I mean by units?
Number of units in the building.
Yeah, usually you guys are proration masters. This is a piece of cake. Don't throw in a little trick like, oh, it's a duplex or it's a triplex, just to throw you off. So Damien is purchasing a triplex that rents for $1,800 per unit per month. All tenants paid rent by June 5th. Yeah, right? What is the rent proration if closing is held on June 19th? Ooh, what do we get to do? Look what post license been up to. We're going to get into that today.
It just reminded me, I haven't, I meant to bring you a set of markers, because that's the other thing you can't see on the videos is the markers very well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I almost need 2 cameras, like one on the board.
Yeah.
Actually, when I edit these, I'm going to go back and do a picture-in-picture, I think, and put, so you can see the writing closer.
Well, you're doing a lot with an iPhone, bro. Like, it's not like it's a real camera. You're doing a heck of a lot with an iPhone.
I've been working pretty hard. It's funny, though. You're like, I want to buy a real camera. They don't really exist anymore.
Yes, they do. They
Like a
make better life.
GoPro. Well, now you can get like the $3,000. I want to make like a movie camera. I don't need that. I ain't going to sell it. I ain't selling it to Sony. Y'all, so I forgot to apologize, I am still fighting some kind of cold, so I apologize if I'm like snotty and sneezing, sound funky. I sound funky to me, so I can only imagine what I sound like to you guys.
Like the chef on the Muppets.
Yeah. It feels like. Wah, wah, wah. Alright, let's see how you did. $1,800 per unit per month. So what does that mean?
Multiply times 3.
Yeah, we get $1,800 in rent per unit, so we get 3 units. What's that total rent?
5,400 a month.
$5,400 a month. I'm gonna pause right here. This is also called potential gross income. This is assuming that all units are rented and all units paid on time. This is how much we all collected. Now, in this case, the $5,400 is also our effective gross income, meaning that's actually what we collected. I only say that to allude to where we're going today. So $5,400 is our monthly rent, right?
Yeah.
Now, how many days do we have?
30.
30.
30 days every month. So what's our daily rate?
180.
180 bucks a day. Not a bad job. $180 a day. So if I make $180 a day and we're closing on June 19th, what should my proration be? How do I figure out my days? Who gets the day of closing? Didn't say, so we're gonna assume the seller. Because seller owns the day of closing in North Carolina unless it says otherwise. So 1 through 19 is the seller. And then 20 through the 30th would be the buyer. Right?
Is it the first or does it go by the fifth when they pay rent?
Good question. So the rent, this is a really good question. He says, is it the first or is it the fifth when they pay the rent? The rent is for the whole month, all 30 days.
Oh,
It's due on the first. By the way, the lease says it's supposed to be paid on the first. We're just not gonna penalize you if you pay by the fifth. So in this case, they are paying for the first as well. It's just they're actually paying late, to be honest. So on the proration of days, if the seller's getting 19 days, what is that? Times 180.
3420.
How much?
3420.
34.20. Okay. So this is how much the seller is owed.
You know.
Now what about our buyer? They're 20 through 30, so how many days is that? 10 days. Oops. So that's 10 days. Times 180 days, or $100, $180 per day. There we go. Is what? So $1,800 is what's to the buyer.
You got a problem here.
We do have a problem, right? What's our problem?
And they don't add up to equal 51.
Oh, well, that is a problem.
You got 11 days, not 10.
Okay. Oh, right, because it's the 20th. This is where the fingers, right, Alex? So, because the seller owns it 1 through the 19th, so then 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th, 30 is 11.
Is this we need to add the plus one?
Yeah. Well, you can just count them. I don't really care how you get there.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
the buyer gets 6 months at 30 days plus 11 days.
so what's the 11 day for the buyer?
1980.
19.
There you go. Now you ain't got a problem.
Now we're good. And how did you check that? This plus this should equal this, right?
Yeah.
It's a good catch.
But when I see the 20 at the end and it was 0 on the other side, it couldn't be.
Someone right. That's right. So good news is it's always going to be multiple choice. You can kind of always work backwards to check it. Now here's the other problem. What I thought you were alluding to is the rent was due on the first and everybody paid it on time. So where is our rent money right now?
Trust fund.
Well, potentially, assuming no property management company is involved.
Seller's bank
That's what the
account.
seller.
Yeah, sellers. This is the seller's money. They have collected $5,400,
So they need to give it.
but they're only owed $3,420. So on the closing statement,
Yeah, you debit
we need to
Right.
debit
the
the
seller.
seller
Credit the buyer.
and credit the buyer the same amount. See how that works? So we're going to take it from one pocket and move it to the other. Anytime you have money changing hands, it's going to go on both sides of that closing problem. We're going to take it from the seller because he's already collected all of it, but he has to give a credit back to the buyer for their days. Does that make sense? And this will happen, guys. You will purchase properties that, whether your folks are even going to buy it to live in it, or if they are in fact buying it because it does make $180 a day, which is good money. So either way, you just have to make sure, and I have been on both sides of this coin, where in fact it has not been negotiated or prorated. And now the offer to purchase says it will be prorated, but sometimes attorneys or other agents will not prorate it. I always check it. I want to make sure, even if it was, $180 a day, even if it's 2 or 3 days, you're talking about $300 or $400. I'd pay for the appraisal. Let's get that. So that's proration of rents. Yes, sir.
I guess I'm a little confused here. He's paying more than he paid for a month, 1980 debit to the seller?
Because it's $1,800 per
Per
unit.
unit.
He
It's
said-
a
Okay,
triplex,
alright, that's
yeah.
what it
You gotta
was.
watch those units, they will
And
get
then
you
it's
everything.
divided by 3 for the,
Yeah, because the
Okay.
total gross rents was this.
I divided it by 3 and that's why I got it. Okay,
Yeah.
alright.
I love an $1,800 a month rent. That's a good day.
Yeah.
Good day. Also, and we'll get into the landlord-tenant stuff, but I always like to interject. If you're buying a property with a tenant in place like this, the new owner has to honor the lease. They don't get to be like, oh, it's mine now, get out. And that's why you want to procure copies of all the leases when you get ready to buy this property. One, I want to see what did the tenant agree to in lease fee. Two, what's the security deposit and where is it being held? Also, I want to know what are the expiration dates, how long are they there, and does it have an automatic renewal? So if you're helping somebody purchase a property with a tenant in it, there's a lot more questions to ask than if it's just a normal single-family transaction. All right, so hopefully at this point in time, we have some answers to a few of these questions. How do you handle repair issues and requests? How does this work in real life? If we can,
Call the landlord.
Just doing the due diligence.
yeah, if you're a tenant, call the landlord.
Before you
You
get
talking about
on
a regular single family?
Yeah, just in a purchase transaction. Say in the purchase transaction, the buyer has found some things that need to be fixed.
You
What are
can
their
ask
options?
for them, but they're
You
not
ask for the
obligated to do
license, you
anything.
just don't have to do it.
Yeah, we request through a repair request agreement that says we would like the seller to fix. Is the seller obligated to fix anything?
No.
No. But this is why we call it a caveat emptor, buyer beware state. Do your own homework, and then if you're comfortable with what you have found, close. If you're not comfortable, you can ask the seller to fix it. If they fix it, great. If not, walk away. When should I walk away?
Before due diligence. if you can.
Before 5 o'clock on my due diligence date, because what does that mean I get back?
Your due diligence money.
Not due diligence money.
Earnest money.
Earnest money.
Sorry.
Earnest money
That's
comes
my
back.
question, like, if you find something wrong with the house, you never get your due diligence money back, that's gone.
Right.
Not unless, now, his question was, if you find something wrong with the house, you never get your due diligence back. That is true unless
They lied?
they lied.
Okay.
So if the seller's like, oh no, we don't have no mold,
Then you can sue.
and you can prove darn well they knew that the basement was growing all kinds of fungi, then in that case you could. Now, it does become a civil matter at that point, it's buyer seller.
What if they mark no representation?
Now, and that's a great point. They can say no representation, even if they do know.
Yeah.
Because they have the right in North Carolina to sell as is, where is. I don't have to tell you a thing. I can know that you're sitting on a nuclear waste dump and be like, sorry, Charlie, you do your homework. If you like it, buy it. If not, too bad. Yes, sir.
If they actually mark that it doesn't have mold, why would it matter whether they knew it or not? They said that it didn't, which is an affirmative statement that it did not, not that, to my knowledge, it doesn't have.
And to answer
Which
your
is no
question, the
representation.
disclosure is up to your best of your knowledge.
Ah,
So if they don't know about
Fair
it, they may be able to say that. Now, if they are lying about it, and that's really what we're getting into the matter of, and it does come up, and I've had as a broker in charge this question probably 3 or 4 times in the last month. When the seller lies on the disclosure statement, that's fraud. The question is, can you prove it?
yeah, exactly.
And if you knew, for
Most of the
example,
time, no.
they had a mold mitigator come out a month before they put it on the market, and you knew that, then you probably have grounds for
Previous buyer discovered it and,
or a previous discovery and they walked away that became a material fact. Absolutely.
What if they fix something, I don't know, like a leaky basement a couple of years before? What would they put there? Would they say, and it's not leaking, for the last 2 years it hadn't leaked?
I'd probably say just that. Hey, we had a leaky basement 2 years prior. We've had it fixed and no problem since.
And show receipts.
So you'd write it in?
Yeah, I would. Well,
Okay.
if I'm a homeowner. Now, and kind of perpetuating that conversation a little bit,
I don't mean the broker, I meant the
I was going to say, let's not get fuzzy on who's who, right?
Yeah,
The seller could darn well know we have mold, we have a nuclear waste dump. Oh, we didn't know we had a nuclear waste dump. Now we know we have a nuclear waste dump. Seller still doesn't have to tell anybody, even if it's been discovered by a previous buyer. Who does though?
Agent.
The agent.
Brokers have that material fact, and as soon as we're aware of that material fact, we have to disclose it. The sellers do not.
now if they took their house off the market and put it back on, they would have to they would have to disclose it.
They
then.
would not. They could choose no representation and not say.
They dropped the age.
But as a broker, if we know about it, we have to disclose.
Okay.
we
Yeah,
don't
North
have that
Carolina
luxury.
is a as is, where is, buyer do your own inspection state. The only time that changes is when brokers get involved. And brokers are required to disclose and discover any material facts that we should or could have. Yes, sir.
Now, could you just get another broker and that doesn't know about the problem, or would that be put on the MLS once we get discovered?
This question is, could I get another broker? Possibly. If it was put on MLS or in any way put out there, and that broker knew about it, they too would have to disclose it.
Huh.
Yeah. Now, if the broker had no way of knowing or no way of finding out, and you just didn't tell them, then they may not
You know,
have
so
to.
like your broker finds out, you both know that you have this problem, but at this point, you don't wanna take care of it. Could you just fire that broker, get another broker that doesn't know it, it's not put on the MLS, and it would still be?
Potentially, as long as that new broker doesn't have the ability to find it in any way, shape, or form.
So the old broker would be mad and just put it up there anyway.
If the old broker, for example, put it in MLS,
Yeah.
the new broker would be liable for discovering and disclosing that.
Or even if you just called them on the phone and said, hey, man, just, you know,
What
heads
happened?
up.
Yeah, what happened? What happened? Yeah, what happened here? And always good to ask questions, it really is.
Do you do that very often when they fire a broker or not?
Not usually unless I have flags, like something's not making sense. And one thing you'll learn, if I teach you nothing else from this class, is to always ask questions. One thing that we never do is make decisions for anybody. We always present information and ask questions. That's really, if I had to sum up our job as brokers, we gather information and ask questions. At the end of the day, that's really what we do.
And unlock houses.
Unlock houses, yeah, that's really it. And that's gonna come to an end one day. Smart houses get smarter. So yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing, is just be cautious with understanding North Carolina. Now, that may not be other states, but North Carolina, buyer beware, caveat emptor, as is, where is, seller doesn't have to tell you or do anything. They can request it as buyer, and seller may oblige the request or may not. Brokers, however, always have to discover and disclose to everyone any material facts, no matter who we work for. Remember that whole we owe all customers 3 things? What are the 3 things we owe?
Honesty,
Honesty,
integrity.
fairness.
Honesty, fairness, and disclosure to everyone. So that's why the broker kind of injection changes that North Carolina caveat emptor buyer beware mantra a little bit. And I'll give you an example of how important this can be. I had a case this week, actually this morning, where buyers call me, like, hey, my broker's telling me this, can you verify that it's right? So they put this house under contract. They did $2,500 in due diligence. Okay, $2,500 in due diligence. 0 earnest money.
They should have split.
You can do 0 earnest?
You can do 0 earnest
Yeah,
money.
they should
Yeah.
split.
You could
You can do 0 due diligence.
diligence.
You don't have to have due diligence or earnest money. That's a great point. They're not requirements of the contract. It was not great negotiating on the listing agent's half, because what has now happened is the buyer is aware of this, and they have discovered issues that make them a little skittish, and their due diligence runs up tomorrow at 5. But think about this, if there's no earnest money on the line,
Nothing to lose.
who cares about due diligence?
Yeah, it's gone already.
Because I can walk away the morning of closing, and I got nothing on the line.
Yeah.
So this is why, as brokers, I bring this up, because if you're that listing broker, we get the impression that, hey, everybody's gonna terminate before due diligence if they terminate, because they want that earnest money back. Well, if there's no earnest money on the line, or if it's not enough to make it worth their while, make sure you negotiate enough earnest money to make it painful if they have to walk away. Or at least have that conversation with your seller client that says, here's what could happen, right? They could walk away the morning of closing, and you got due diligence, and that's all. Now, if it's a $10,000 due diligence fee, I might be cool with that, right? The seller, I don't care when they walk away, I got $10,000 to pay my mortgage for 3 months.
So just to clarify, if the buyer breaches, the only thing that the seller can get is earnest money and due diligence, is that right?
If the
Buyer
buyer terminates at any point in time,
breaches.
yes, we'll say breaches. Yep, that would be fair. Then the only repercussions to the seller are liquidated damages, which are earnest money and due diligence.
Okay.
Yeah. Now the other side's not true, right? What happens on if the seller breaches?
Specific
They can
performance.
sue for specific performance.
Force
the seller.
Sue for specific performance. That's a lot of S's. So they have the opportunity to do that. What's the other one? They can sue them. What if they're like, you know what? You can keep your property. I'm out.
Oh, they can all just come to mutual agreement.
They could come to mutual agreement, but they're going to come after you for compensatory damages, right?
Paying
I want
for
my earnest money.
inspection, yeah, all
I want my
stuff.
due diligence,
Yeah.
and all my money for those inspections thereafter.
When you said hold again.
Yes, and who also might be due some money in this scenario?
The broker,
Broker.
Yeah, right? So there might be some commissions in there as well.
if they were earned.
So that whole suing for specific performance or compensatory damages makes it a lot more prudent that the seller not breach the contract.
So if a buyer in your situation where they didn't have any earnest money, they decided to walk away morning of closing, for instance, buyer's agent is just left high and dry at that point, isn't he?
Now, there is a provision in the offer to purchase and contract, whether you choose to use it or not. It actually, I'm sorry, in the
Buyer's agency.
buyer agency agreement, it actually does say that the earnest money would be split 50-50, or you can specify, but split between seller and listing broker. Excuse me, so if in fact the buyer did terminate and the earnest money was to be credited to the seller, then, or the buyer, actually it's on both sides, then a portion of that be paid to the broker for their time. Essentially saying because we did bring back ready, willing, available sellers,
Yeah.
that earnest money could be afforded to
And you
us.
said, but you said that was split between the seller and the listing broker, or the seller and
Yes.
all the brokers?
The seller and the listing broker when a buyer breaches beyond due diligence.
Yeah, so the buyer's agent is still left high and dry.
Yeah. Hopefully, the intent there is that they're hopefully gonna go sell them something else.
Yeah,
Also, they have a buyer agency agreement that says I'm expected to get owed or paid, whatever, and they
Yeah.
could pursue action against them because they did get them there.
but how is the wording on that? I'm expected to be paid when it, closes, when it,
Well, that's a great
Earned it.
question. So the commission is earned, right?
Sure.
When we procure ready, willing, and able buyer.
that's the listing side.
Earned.
But it's for the buyer side too, meaning
Oh,
I
so-
found a
okay.
property that you were ready, willing, and able to purchase.
As evidenced by the fact you entered a contract.
Now, if it's in the due diligence period, right,
Yeah,
and it wasn't what you thought it was gonna be,
yeah, yeah.
but if we've gone beyond due diligence, then at that point I could probably say, hey, listen, you walked away for no reason, dude.
Yeah,
We were ready to close. The morning of closing, I've worked all the way up to the day I get paid and you bail on me.
yeah,
What does our buyer agency say I'm owed?
yeah, and especially if they're walking away from that house and you might wanna chase them, but then you still have the reputation of suing clients.
Yeah, the whole suing of clients thing never goes that well. It just doesn't go that well, especially in the
I
world of
think it's
social
that
media.
quick.
Yeah, social media and reviews does not go
Yeah.
well. So what if the buyer is unable to obtain a loan? When do you think they should determine this or get this information?
By due diligence date or.
Remember, our due diligence is a drop dead date, 5 o'clock on that date. We need everything done. I need to know, is my loan done? Is the appraisal good? Are the inspections good? When do the repairs that the seller has agreed to get to complete? When do they have to be finished? Prior to closing. That's what most people think, is it has to be done during due diligence. The repairs do not have to be done due diligence. It just says they have to be completed prior to closing in a good workmanlike manner. Which means you may end up in a delay in closing if you go
they're not.
the day before closing, you're like, yeah, we fixed it. And you're like, nope, try again.
Just take the money.
I love money in lieu of repairs. I love money in lieu of repairs because it just goes so much easier.
You see most people run into diligence through, I mean, because the lenders, you know how that works. I mean, it takes forever, a lot of stuff's last minute, they're not even doing the title search till a week before closing. I mean, just due diligence typically run to about a week, week and a half before closing on average.
I mean, his question is kind of what's typical for due diligence period, and it does depend on the transaction as to whether it's a loan or a cash.
Yeah.
But I always like to get as much as I can if I'm on the buy side,
Yeah.
and if I'm on the seller side, I like to get as least as I can.
Yeah.
But I would expect if you're getting a loan, you'll probably need at least 3 weeks to get that appraisal back.
That's what I was looking at.
Because appraisers are usually given 10 days from the day they receive it, sometimes as long as 14, to complete it and get it back.
Yeah, I mean, 3 weeks is plenty of time to get an appraisal and an inspection as long as you don't need like a survey or something.
Yeah, and the other thing to do is keep a pulse on your vendors. How backed up are they? Might even be worth calling the lender, say if we order appraisal, how long does it take to get back? Also, it has to do with kind of the prioritizing of what gets done first. So in the example where you're under contract at 200, but you and your buyer feel like this is like a $195,000 house, and you just don't think it's going to appraise.
Do that first.
I'm going to spend the money on the appraisal first, and I'd like it to come back before I spend money on inspections or anything else, so that I can kind of make sure I get that worked out. Because if the seller doesn't budge off of that amount, I'm not going to buy it. So that's a conversation to have with them to help prioritize what goes in what order and how much time you might need. So what if a buyer wants to terminate the contract during the due diligence period? Can they do that?
Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
For
What are they
any or
gonna
no
lose?
reason.
Due diligence.
Yes, and Steve made a good point. Say that again real loud.
For any or no reason.
Any or no reason at all. This is an important conversation to have with your sellers. because they get so frustrated when a buyer terminates. Well, why? What's wrong with the house? They could wake up on Sunday and be like, this is a dumb idea. I'm terminating my contract. And they can do so during their due diligence period. They don't even have to have a reason. They don't have to give a reason and may not give a reason. You may not want them to give a reason because it might be a material fact you have to disclose. Yes, sir.
Back to the house you were talking about, is 2,500 like a large amount for due diligence? Like,
It varies. It's very interesting. He was asking about due diligence and
Depends
what's a
on the
large amount. It depends on the purchase price. It depends on the market. It depends on a lot of different things.
shouldn't
And
you always get more for earnest money than you do due diligence though?
it, again, is a negotiable item. And places like Raleigh, Durham, Charlotte, where they're getting multiple offers above, like people are paying above market value on purpose. They know the house is worth 200 and they're paying 250. They know that they're bringing cash to the table to make that happen because there's no houses to be had. And they have to live there, so they're paying whatever it takes to live there. So it appraises at 200, great, I'll get a loan for 200. I'm gonna bring the other 50 out of my pocket. No, I'm gonna overpay. So there they go very high on due diligence and earnest money because they're often in multiple offers and they wanna try to win it.
Which is crazy, because that makes the next house worth $250.
Yeah, it does, and it drives this, and then you get these big bubbles, right? And then you get the big bursts. Here, we don't have that as much, but in a multiple offer situation, earnest money and due diligence amounts are probably gonna be important. If I'm buying a $100,000 house, probably doesn't make sense for me to put $4,000 down in due diligence. I could probably do better.
I mean, it's all just good faith toward how serious are you about the transaction. You should be trying to split it between the two
Yeah.
to some degree.
And in some instances, if I know I'm buying the house no matter what, I can find a nuclear waste dump for the basement, I'm still buying it, who cares what I put down for due diligence? I gotta bring it all at the closing
It's gonna
table
be
anyway.
credited back anyway.
It's a credit back, I'm not losing it, I'm getting it credited back to me at the purchase. Only time due diligence becomes in question is when you terminate it, otherwise it's a credit back to you at the buy. So you're not actually losing any money with due diligence or earnest money, as long as you buy it. And then after that expiration, we know what comes on the line.
Earnest money.
Earnest money, make sure you get some, or have it negotiable. But I'm glad you brought that up, Kayla, because the important part here too is due diligence money and earnest money are not a requirement. One thing, I had one come through, like I said this week, and I had to correct them because it had, first of all, it had NA for due diligence. I'm like, due diligence is amount, put 0. So 0 due diligence fee. The due diligence date, however, still needs to be there. We still have to have a due diligence date. So even though there's no money, there's still a date with it. So
Yeah, 'cause that's the
important.
time of the essence when they can contract by.
Yeah, we need that date. We need to know what, even if it's just a couple days, we need to know what that date is. Cool. So now we are effectively getting to Unit 17. We're going to talk about Unit 17 and 18, which is a lot about financing, a lot about investment analysis, things of that nature, a little bit more, a little bit higher level conversation. I also will preface these two chapters by letting you know some of this is going to feel a little overwhelming. If it starts to feel overwhelming, it's okay. It's not as in-depth, it's not a level 3 topic, okay? You're gonna see a lot of level 1, a lot of level 2 stuff. This stuff comes back in post-license, like you saw on the board. So don't let it just go under the rug and forget about it forever. Understand it enough that we can build on it when you get out of here.
So level 1 is just sort of definitions, and level 2 is,
Really being able to apply the definition, like use it in a sentence, so to speak. And then level 3 would be, we gave you an entire scenario around what's going on and what just happened here.
Demonstrate.
just know it inside out.
Demonstrate, yeah. Yeah, exactly, know it inside out. And so we've talked a lot about the financing of it and the back end of the instruments, right? Now we're really gonna talk about, well, how do we know what to pay? How do we get to that value? What's the difference between an appraisal and what you guys are gonna come up with, which is that CMA? So we're really gonna dig into kind of CMAs, BPOs, all those fun things. Appraisers, we're gonna talk about them behind their backs, it's gonna be great. Nobody's an appraiser in the room, right?
Not anymore.
Not anymore, right? Okay, so we love and loathe them. So we're gonna understand the difference between market value and price, how to make adjustments to the comps, and learn how to apply the various approaches to the sales price. Now you may love this section or you may hate this section. It usually ends up being one or the other. But I don't dislike it. I will tell you from all of my years of practicing real estate, this was probably the hardest thing I ever encountered. Not because it's a hard thing to do. It's hard, it's as much art as it is
A lot of
science.
subjectivity.
Yeah, it's a lot of subjectivity. And I say that when you get to real world. And in real world, in a post-licensing class, you'll understand that. Because I take you into real life MLS and we pull up a real life house that might be a double wide in East Bend and say, figure out what it's worth or what you would list it today. And that's a lot different than the beautiful math that we will be given today that says, oh, this bedroom in this house. Now this is the premise of the Zestimate, right? The Zestimate is on Zillow and tells you how much your house is worth. That works when they have a 1,000-home neighborhood and they're all the same. When you have a double wide on East Bend in 5 acres, there's probably not another one like it. So the Zestimate's like, well, clearly that mansion sold at $100 a square foot, so should the double wide. Right? So they don't know the difference. And when they have a good data set of similar properties, it makes sense. And in this class, we're going to live in that 1,000-home neighborhood, really. When you get out of here, we'll live in real life Winston. Yeah.
The problem with Zestimate is like, look at Winston, right? If you're on like the southeast side of Winston, it's a $30,000 house. You take the same house and you move it 4 blocks up to the west,
Yeah.
and then now it's like a $100,000 house. Same house, just 4 blocks that way instead of.
Which I have done.
Yeah.
I've moved.
Estimates are scary, dude.
Yeah, the estimates are, and I love, I bring that up, and I don't by any means give them credibility, because they are not. It's like tax cards, they're not credible, Zestimates are not credible, Zillow is useless. And actually Zillow's entire premise is based on the fact that they have data. That's, I won't say they're useless, they have a place in the marketplace, clearly. But their entire business model is to have the most number of eyes on their website, because they get all that ad-generated revenue, plus brokers who don't know how to do an ROI will buy leads from them. And
The problem is their data's outdated.
and that's their concept. They will tell you straight up, we are not concerned about accuracy. We are concerned about having the most amount of data, and that is their business model, and it works. That is not our business model. We are concerned with accuracy, and that's ultimately, if anything, the Zillow helps us. Zillow gives us credibility. When a consumer can go to Zillow and see their house is worth $280, and we can come to their table and show you, here's why it's not, or here's why it's worth more. Now we have that local expertise, we can bring that value to the table. And that's why no website will ever replace the broker. It'll help complement us, but it won't ever replace us. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about the appraisal. Appraisal, first and foremost, is done by a licensed appraiser. Go figure. Now, let's be clear. We just said it. I will say it again. No one in this room is a licensed appraiser. So don't act like one. Here is why. Appraisers establish value, okay? We don't. And I have to be careful because as a broker, we tend to use these words a little bit interchangeably, and our nomenclature is a little bit different. In this class, value is what a house is worth on the market on a given day, established by a licensed appraiser. Okay? That's the value. Given date. What does that mean? How long is it good for?
1 day.
1 day only. Why?
Could change.
What if the neighbor's house sold the next day? Now we've got a new comparable. Now we have a new appraisal. Now, I say they're good for 1 day. The appraisal will say it's good for 1 day. Most lenders will use or honor an appraisal for usually 60 to 90 days, sometimes as long as 6 months. Depends on the lender. And frankly, depends on the...
Yeah, by the time you get it in your hands, it's already a week outdated anyway.
It
All the
is.
administrative, because they do all the research on the front end.
It is. And you may run into a time where you need to challenge an appraisal. And I had this happen with a large tract of land that I had that, and we'll talk about it from our application. We're looking for sold properties, right? With things that have sold in our typical marketplace. And I had a parcel of land that someone asked me to list. And I listed it. It's like $750,000. Everybody thought I was dumb because nothing had sold for that price range. But there was one, and it was under contract. And I knew what it listed at, and I knew even if it sold close to what it was listed at, it would substantiate our price. Well, a couple months ago, it finally closed. Now everybody's like, oh, well, there it is. But we needed that closed comparable to help justify the value.
So they couldn't count it because it hadn't closed yet?
Yes, correct. And to her question, it was they couldn't count it until it has closed, because what if it doesn't sell, right? What if it falls through? What if they terminate? And so we were waiting for that very diligently to close, and it finally did, which helps substantiate our value. So you really want to look at, and I say that, that's called the sales comparison approach, which we'll look at, but that's what we're looking for is the sales. And that's usually what we live in. So real estate agents should not use the term appraisal. We are not issuing appraisals. When you are going out and soliciting folks and saying, hey, do you want to know what your house is worth? Let me give you an appraisal. No, that's not your job. Let me give you the value. Maybe in the gray area, but not technically great for this class. What I want to help you to do excuse me, is determine your probable sales price. If I were to list your house on the market for sale today, what would it probably sell at? That's our goal. An appraisal is a formal written documented estimate of value. In fact, you have a copy of an appraisal in your textbook in the middle of chapter 17. Interjected right in there so you can read over one. Cool thing about looking at that appraisal in your textbook is it will show you some of the things we're going to talk about, one of which is the 3 approaches to an appraisal. And we're going to talk about those too. I highly, highly, highly encourage you to read that sample appraisal in your book just because it will help you understand why we're studying these things. Again, you're not in appraiser school, right? Just like we weren't in lender school. If you learn to do that, you're going to learn to do this. All right, CMAs, this is what we do. Comparative market analysis. A comparative market analysis is done by a broker to help them determine a probable sales price. The difference between a CMA and a BPO is that the BPO is done for a bank. CMA is typically done for a consumer. So in order to be an appraiser in North Carolina, as I told you, you have to have a licensed appraisal, or you have to be a licensed appraiser. However, the laws for appraisers have a couple of exemptions. For brokers, licensed brokers, to be able to conduct CMAs and BPOs, which are similar to appraisals, but never for the purposes of originating a loan, simply to help us with prospects, someone we hopefully intend to sell their home. Now, do you think we're going to get to sell the bank's house? Sort of. In the recession, brokers were lured into doing BPOs because everybody wanted to do the bank's business. We wanted to be the foreclosure agent who listed foreclosures because that was all that was selling in the recession. And if you didn't have foreclosure listings, then you were a buyer's agent selling foreclosures. So we would do BPOs with the hope that we might one day get that. Well, in the actual reality, we were doing hundreds of BPOs and there was no promise of, or even indication that we would get this. So the rules were changed a little bit to allow us to charge a fee for BPOs and CMAs, so long as you are a full broker. Full broker only. Broker. Yeah, you'll be a broker. So CMAs and BPOs can be done by brokers, and you can charge a fee for them. However, you have to be a full broker to get paid for them. Ultimately, at least in my business practice, I do these for free because my hope is I'm going to get the listing or it's a past client, something of nature I'm trying to help them. These guys I will charge because they will use and abuse you. And a BPO for their purposes is similar to a CMA, but banks just typically foreclose on a property. I'm having like a stroke today, I can't talk. So they're trying to figure out what is their asset approximately worth? What's the condition? Is this thing burned to the ground? Do we have windows in it? Is it safe? Is it in a $200,000 marketplace? Is it in $100,000? Because these are national banks, they have no idea what they just got. So they will pay you $50, $75, whatever you can negotiate, to go out, take a couple pictures, and do it's like an online CMA form for them. So it's
Might
not better
you
than something else.
also be asked to do a BPO for a FSBO that has no intention of listing it with a broker?
It would be more of a CMA, because his question was, would it be for a BPO for sale by owner? I would still fall under a CMA, because ultimately that they're for sale by owner, you're trying to get their listing at some point, even if they don't.
But I mean, they say, I'm not gonna list, I just wanna pay for your opinion of what I should list it for. I'm not
I
gonna
can
use
still
it.
Still for a consumer.
It's still for a consumer, and I would charge them for it,
Yeah.
but they are no list, they just don't know yet.
Wow.
Yeah, and the reason I say that is for sale by owners, a lot of them are capable, and I would say less than not. It's easy to put a for sale by owner sign in your yard typically and sell it. It's not easy to get to the process in a way that you won't get sued afterwards. And that's usually what happens. I've told you about all the ways we get sued, right? We're highly liable, and you had to go through all this training. For sale by owner, saw it on YouTube, got a sign, put it in the yard. They don't even know about the disclosure requirements that we have. So there's a lot of liability that comes about when you do that. Nothing wrong with it, they can do it, and some people truly can. So the difference between a CMA and a BPO is really just, sorry, CMA, BPO, we do as brokers, appraisals are done by appraisers. Questions on that?
Just to put a finer point on it, the provisional brokers, when we go out of here, we can do a CMA all day long as it's our client.
Yes.
We have a listing agreement with them, we
Yes.
just can't charge them a separate fee just for that, then it becomes a BPO.
Correct, yeah, and well,
Wait a minute, I didn't get that from what you said earlier.
so his question,
I thought BPO was strictly with the bank.
the BPO is for the bank, and.
Or whatever, yeah.
Yeah,
whatever
so
you
here's
call
the
it,
point
you
of
charge a
clarity.
separate fee.
The only difference between you all as provisionals and me as a full broker, I can charge a fee to do either.
Right.
You can do them all day for free. You just can't charge a fee until you're no longer a provisional.
So you were saying as a provisional? Is
Yeah,
that-
you could, if you had let's say you got a listing agreement, you could do and would be expected to do a CMA. You would probably, be bringing in your BIC and, look over your shoulder while you're doing it, but you're legally allowed to do it, you just can't charge a separate fee.
I got it.
And you will, because your goal as a broker, provisional or full,
Part of
is
the
to
value.
get listings. And you can't get listings if you can't tell people what you think you can sell their house for. I saw two hands.
He's up first.
Okay.
I've got my question.
Alright, sounds good.
Alright, so just to make sure I know, if I have one that, let's say, I'm selling it, I'm the seller's agent, and then I have to do a CMA for it, they're still technically compensating me for that.
Yeah,
So
even
is
if I don't charge on the upfront, like I could charge them $50 just to do the CMA.
I'm
Whether
asking
they
for
hire
like
me
me
or not.
personally, like it's property that I buy to flip, and then I'm acting as an agent for it, and they ask for a CMA on it, is that not crossing the line?
Great question. So I think if I understood the question, if you are the broker seller and someone's asking you to do a CMA, could you do it for them?
On the property that I own,
On
because
the
I'm still
property
getting
you own?
compensated,
I
yeah.
would say probably not. What you would or could do is give them raw data.
Okay,
And I'm not interpreting it, I'm not giving suggestions. Here's the closed MLS sheets for the 5 closest houses.
okay.
And I can give them, that's publicly available data. Perfect. I mean, I'm not in any way guiding them whatsoever. Here's raw data. Do with it what you want to do with it. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Probably defer them to an agent or an attorney if they so choose.
And you would do one as a buyer's agent as well for your client, right?
Yes, that's a good point. We'll come
I
back to that,
couldn't
yeah.
do that though, because it would be a property that I own, so that was really.
Right, yeah, because you can rep a buyer.
Just
Yeah.
trying to wrap this tight. If you're a provisional, you can do it for your client, but you just can't do it for customers that just might wanna just give us a market analysis and that's it, but you can do it.
You just
for
can't
actual
charge for it.
clients.
Can't charge.
So you can, as a provisional or full broker, you can do CMAs or BPOs for anyone you so choose. The only difference is, are you getting paid for it or are you not? And in Thomas's situation, he was saying, his is weird, he owns the property.
Oh, okay, he's selling.
So he's one of the parties, so he couldn't help anybody on the other side of the table. The buyer side, he couldn't be like, sorry, you own your own.
Yeah, but he'll do his own to know what he wants to list it for.
Yeah, now he should do it on for
Yeah.
himself,
Yeah.
so he knows what he wants to list it for. And actually, a good investor is either gonna have a broker or will do it themselves before they ever buy it.
Yeah.
Because I wanna know what's it worth right about now, and then if I do all these things and it looks like this at the end, what should I expect to sell it for at that point in time?
I actually usually have the seller's agent and the buyer's agent do one, because you get different answers.
You should, and actually,
should do different.
Thomas's comment was right in line with Chris's, which was, the Real Estate Commission in North Carolina expects us both to do one.
Yeah.
How did you coach your buyer on what to offer if you didn't do a CMA? How did you list the property if you didn't do a CMA? And they couldn't, especially on the list side, they may ask to see that. Say, hey, where did you get your comps? What did you use and how did you get your pricing? Oh, it's just a gut feeling. That's not good enough. And that is a lot of people's response.
As a buyer, how would you obtain the seller's CMA? I mean, they
You
don't owe
would.
you
You would do-
anything, they
you
owe
would
you
do your own.
disclosures, honesty, and fairness, and ain't nothing says about the work I did for my seller client.
Yeah, and on the buy side, you're just doing it, and you're looking to buy 120 Main Street, and they've got it listed at $299. I'm going to look around and say, run my own numbers and say,
Sure,
what
sure,
I
sure,
wish
sure.
I say it was worth. So I
Okay.
can say, hey, listen, I know they're listed at $299, but my comps don't say you should pay a penny more than $275.
And they probably chose different comparables, which is no different than two different appraisers doing the same.
And that's still not necessarily telling them what to do. That's just arming them with good information
Sure.
that they may need to know. That says, hey, you may run into an appraisal issue, right, as a buyer's agent.
Typically, I'll ask for one, and just ask like the listing agent for it if I'm the buyer.
Yeah.
A lot of times if they don't share it with you, just call them and pretend you're a client and just be like, hey, I'm interested, can you show me your, and then they'll give it to you.
Show me your comparables.
Yeah, they'll give it to you.
And at that point in time, they usually go do one, because they
Yeah.
may not have. You'd be surprised at how many folks do not have one in their file. It's, hey, 199 seemed like a good number. How'd you get there? I just know it. No, you don't. No, you don't.
How many
So,
comparables should you use? Like, what's a good number of comparables?
usually 3 minimum. 3 minimum is kind of the stamp of the comparables. And we're actually gonna do one. One of the next part of our, section of our classes is we're gonna really break it down, because we, in real life, end up having to do this and make adjustments. Because, like I told you, no 2 houses are really the same. Some's a little bigger, some's a little smaller, garage, basement, whatever the case may be. So we have to make these adjustments as we do these comparable.
We're gonna do it in this class?
We are, yeah, we're gonna, now, I'm
That's
gonna,
fine.
like I said, the one in this class is very much, in that 1,000 home neighborhood, right? It's gonna be much more simplistic than the ones that you run into in real life.
Cookie cutter.
This was always my biggest struggle as a broker, especially being new out of real estate school. Your client says, hey, I wanna sell my house, give me the most amount of money in the least amount of time. Okay, go. And that's all you have, is this 75 hours to figure that out. So how do you go figure out what's, you're trusting me with the largest investment in your life, how do I know that I'm confidently giving you the most amount of money that I can get you? Well, this is practice, and I would say practice a lot. CMAs are probably one of the most challenging parts of our business. They can be a hindrance if you're not competent with them. So with that being said, I got 2 o'clock, so we're gonna go take the first break, and we'll come back and do some more.